Right, Chapter 4, Infection Control. This infection control is one of the one of the something that you will see a lot on the certification test. So I want you guys to please make sure that you um, do spend some time and reading through this chapter, making sure that you make yourself familiar with this with the proper steps for controlling infections. Okay, a lot of what we're going to talk about here in chapter 4 is a great deal of this you have already heard within the past couple months dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. All right. By the end of this chapter, you all will be able to explain the infection control policies and procedures that must be followed in specimen collection and transportation, define the terms healthcare associated, healthcare acquired, and nosocomial infections. Identify the basic programs for infection control and isolation procedures. Explain the proper techniques for hand washing, gowning, gloving, masking, double bagging, and entering and exiting the various isolation areas. Identify the steps to avoid transmission of blood-borne pathogens. Identify ways to reduce risk for infection and accidental needle sticks. Describe the measures that can break each link in the chain of infection. Identify the steps to take in the case of blood-borne pathogen exposure. Describe the components for the chain of infection. State the central purpose of hand hygiene. Describe the CDC's procedure for collection and transport of specimens for Ebola virus testing. Describe the major organism responsible for healthcare associated infections. Right. Um, right. So we have pathogenic disease-causing microorganisms, and as we know, these are things such as bacteria, fungi, and parasites that can lead to an infection. Non-disease, non-pathogenic organisms, and communicable diseases, infectious microorganisms transmitted to individuals by direct or indirect contact or as airborne infections. All right, blood-borne pathogens. We know these describes refers to any infectious microorganisms that are present in the blood. Some of the most common are hepatitis A, B, C, D, and E, HIV, syphilis, malaria, human T cell, lymphomic virus, HTLV types 1 and 2, the Ebola virus, and Zika virus. Just going to point out that in the last edition of this book, we didn't even mention the Ebola virus. It just came up in the height of in light of the pandemic a few years ago when Ebola when we were worrying about Ebola. So rest assured, you all won't be here, but in about a year or two, this book will be redone and it will discuss COVID-19. Right? Healthcare associated infections acquired by patient after admission to a healthcare facility, and we talked about um, the importance of keeping things clean in the hospital. Um, when things aren't clean, and naturally, the patients are going to be more susceptible to contracting an infection. All right. Approximately one of every 20 hospitalized patients will contract HAI. One in every 20 patients. All right. Now think about that. Think about that now. All right. So with everyone in the midst of this pandemic, everyone is going to the hospital because they have exhibited a symptom or they believe they have a symptom. Um, and we know that the only people that are being admitted to the hospital are those that are experiencing chest pains and shortness of breath. Let's imagine with them already here in the hospital, frightened because the the circumstances surrounding the COVID-19, um, that someone is being treated with something contaminated, or because they're looking to turn the beds around so fast in the hospitals to get to see as many patients as possible. Someone does a poor job at cleaning up the area, and someone contracts an HIA and ultimately loses their life. Now, it's still going to go down as a COVID death, but the real reason, the underlying condition, condition will be the HAI, as that will work in the hospital's favor. That's a topic for another day. Okay. The CDC and NIOSH provides research on types of HAIs and nationwide healthcare facilities to determine methods to decrease and avoid these infections for patients and healthcare providers. Okay. Infection control program developed using guidelines by the CDC, the Joint Commission, state regulatory agencies. These addresses sepsis, isolation procedures, education management of community acquired infections, healthcare associated infections. And in the midst of all of this, like you see, like so many people getting involved. Um, if you are following this, if you're following this pandemic for yourself and not just going off what someone is telling you, you'll see that Mayor Mayo is actively out putting to get working with other members of the community to ensure that people are getting the masks that they just recently received. Um, you hear Governor Edward when he speaks, he's talking about all the people that he's talking to and the steps that they believe we need to take to get to put a cap on this COVID pandemic. Um, Encouraging everyone to wear masks and wash their hands, disinfect, frequently touch surfaces, and things of that nature. Staying at home unless you are a essential worker or if you really really need to go somewhere, um, and making sure that you're practicing social distancing, keeping at least 6 feet away from members, people that are not your family members when out in public. Right? Antibiotic resistant microorganisms, or MRSA, resist to staphylococcus, um, can cause severe problems, including bloodstream infections, severe skin infections, pneumonia, um, sepsis, and death. All right, and Clostridium causes colitis. One way that you can be sure to cut down on infection is using the aseptic technique. Okay. Um, Frequent hand hygiene, hand washing, or alcohol-based hand rubs. Use use of barrier garments and personal protective equipment. Avoidance of using mobile phones and chemical settings. Waste management. of contaminated material. Aseptic techniques: use of proper cleaning solution, use of standard precaution, use of sterile procedure when necessary. Please see table 4.1 and 4.2 in your textbooks. And when you refer back to those tables, you see that they mention what what infections or NAIs are most common in certain areas the of healthcare facilities. All right, personal safety from infections during specimen handling. OSHA, agencies of the U.S. Department of Labor, requires employees to provide measures that will protect workers exposed to biological hazards. Healthcare workers routinely exposed to blood and body fluids must take precaution of wearing gloves to protect themselves from infection. Always follow universal precautions for potential BBP exposure. Warning labels on containers that contain blood or potentially infectious materials. And then so what we talked about, like labeling and documentation in the earlier chapters. That's why like this all this stuff is important because we need to know like what's going on. We want to make sure that everything is documented on the patient's chart. And what's documented on the chart, we want to make sure that we are operating in the guidelines to ensure that we don't come in contact with anything that they may have. All right. Um, and you definitely don't want to get these things mixed up, giving someone the wrong thing. That's why it's always important to make sure everything is labeled. All right, um, whether it be you know chemicals or like blood specimens, everything needs to be labeled. All right, and here we see um, employee placing a needle in the sharps container with biohazard waste. All right, so biohazard. Exposure control. Immediately after exposure incident, employee must decontaminate the needle stick, flush exposed mucous membrane sites, report the incident, undergo medical evaluation. Right? All these things are just to protect you. And all these things are also put in place by the CDC, OSHA, and the Joint Commission. These are things that need to take place, and just so that you are protected, so that you won't contract anything that a patient may have, or potentially pass it on to someone else, especially someone else in your family. Okay. So make sure if you are going dealing with needles and the sharp container, someone didn't swap out the sharp container, and there's a needle poking up, and you go to put yours in there, you get stuck with a needle. Want to make sure that you decontaminate that site. If you get something like in your eyes, you want to make sure that you flush out your eyes. Make sure that you report, document everything that happened. Everything leading up to the incident happening, everything that you did after that. Um, just so you make sure that you're in the clear and everything is documented for your sake in the event that something comes up and you find yourself in a malpractice case, um, for your health or the health of a patient that you were dealing with. So again, you just want to make sure that you have everything documented. Undergo medical evaluation. All right. Say you come in contact with you're dealing with a patient that has HIV or has AIDS, and you're drawing blood on them, and you accidentally stick yourself with the contaminated needle. After you get everything cleaned up and document everything, immediately you will want to seek medical attention immediately. And it takes the HIV virus a while to mutate into AIDS, but you still want, and it'll also take a while for it to show up in your system if you do um, if you are exposed to it via a needle stick. So immediately seek medical attention. That way, it's documented that, hey, I went to the doctor at this time. So now we have a starting point as to when we can track the disease. Because it typically takes I think somewhere on average about around a couple months for it to show up. So going as soon as you can. That puts a timestamp on it, so you know you can track it, monitor it as it comes up. Right. Um, Primary objective is to minimize the risk of infection or hazardous circumstances for employees and patients. Right. And that's why now you hear it's such a big deal. They want to make sure that all the healthcare workers have the proper masks. Want to make sure that they have gloves and things of that nature. Want to make sure that you have the proper mask and gloves. Want to make sure that you're disinfecting your most commonly touched surfaces. Uh, and it's not just like your door handles and countertops. I think that you guys live in a generation now where you do everything on your phone. Ask yourself, when was the last time you cleaned your phone? Especially in the midst of this pandemic. It's something to think about. All right. Screening for diseases prior to employment. Measles, mumps, tuberculosis, hepatitis, um, diarrheal diseases, syphilis, and skin disease. As you all know, that prior to you all going to clinicals, you have to go and get a TB skin test done. Right? These are some certain things that you would have to. Um, this is just one example of you being having to be tested for a disease prior to employment. Right? Not only will certain places ask you to take a drug test, some will ask you um, submit to a disease screening prior to them hiring you. Because again, um, something I speak about with for as on the career services end, that the employers get ready to invest a lot in you. All right. Um, so they're right off the dump. Once an employer decides that they make the determination that they're going to hire you, they're about to invest anywhere between 130 to 150% of your salary in you right out the door prior to you even the first time you clock in. And that salary their percentage salary percentage number includes things like your training, any training that they're going to have to provide you with. If it's a company where they provide you with uniforms, ID badges, insurance, all these things are calculated into your salary. So this is already paid forward prior to you being brought on board at a company. So that, and they're looking for people to come in and handle their business because they have already invested a lot of money in this person right out the door. And we definitely want to make sure that they're healthy. Right? Components in the chain. You have your pathogen, reservoir, your port of exit, mode of transmission, portal of entry, and susceptible hosts. Right? The pathogen, this microorganism that causes infectious disease, includes bacteria, fungi, viruses, poisons, protozoa, and worms. Right, the reservoir, an inanimate object that patients who has or is carrying the pathogen. Okay, um, pathogenic infection numerous in healthcare environments. Okay? Again, just to put things into perspective. Reservoir would be someone now who is carrying the COVID, who's been infected with the COVID, and they don't know that they had it. Okay, so unknowingly not having been tested, just passing it around to everyone, just unknowingly. Right? And that's something like on a smaller level, so to speak, because it's not in your blood. Um, but I mean, it's being passed from one person to the next, just like any other germ, common cold, stomach bug, 24-hour bug. So once you come in contact with it, you know, you came in contact through some reservoir. Right? The portal of exit. The pathogen exits from infected person via body fluids, womb debris, release respiratory debris. Right? Right? Sneezing, blood, um, things of that nature. Hey, mode of transmission, direct contact, air, medical instrument, other objects, other vectors. Right? Again, these are just different ways that you can contract an infection or a cold. Right? Again, all these things can be passed on the same means. Right? You can get a cold. You can contract the flu by touching the doorknob after someone just sneezed, just like you can catch something else. Like you can get hepatitis from sitting on a public bathroom seat. All right. Portal of entry. Pathogens must have entrance pathway to a susceptible host. An example of this was the bacteria, Staphylococcus, Staphylococcus, um, that enters through the mouth or nasal passage of susceptible hosts. All right, and I really want to stop using this, but again, just want to put things into perspective. The COVID thing, if they say if it lives in your it lives in your nasal cavity because it's the coolest part of your body, and takes a couple days for it to run its course through your body, and or you'll be infected with it. While it's there and you sneeze, wipe your nose, flick a booger on someone, you can pass it on to them. Right. Make susceptible host. Factors that affect the host susceptibility, the age. Okay, again, we heard all these things now with the beginning of this, and we hear these things throughout this the ongoing of this pandemic, um, saying that older people were more susceptible to contracting this because they have weaker immune systems. All right, and everyone's like, oh, we have to protect our the older people. Now, when a child or a baby contracts it, we're freaking out, but the same rules apply. Babies don't have a strong enough immune system because they haven't been around long enough for their body in common contact with bacteria for their bodies to be able to fight off infections. Okay, drug use, you can contract You can contract HIV from using of like dirty needles from drug use, just like you're more susceptible to contract the COVID if you use drugs, because the drugs are going to break down your immune system. This is something that a virus that attacks your immune system. Right? If you smoke, you're more susceptible to it because the nicotine is wearing down your immune system. Okay, degree of nature of illness. If you have an underlying health condition, all right, status of the immune system. How healthy are you? Are you drinking your water? Are you taking vitamins on the regular? All right. Again, they're telling us all this, and we'll know all this, and we'll read all this stuff, but people will still go in the opposite direction in which they should. When this pandemic first started, when they stated that this was a virus that attacks your immune system, there's absolutely no reason why the world should have freaked out and went about toilet tissue. You go in the grocery store, you go to any store, there's no toilet tissue, there's no disinfectant, etc., etc. But there's still plenty of vegetables, and the vitamins are still falling off the shelf. You want to build, you want to make sure that you keep your immune system healthy so that you can fight off these uh, infections and things of that nature. It's the reason why sanitizer only kills 99.9% of the germs, because that 1% of bacteria you need that to build your immune system up against the infections. All right, you see here how the chain of infection looks at the pathogen, the reservoir, the port of exit, the mode of transmission, port of entry, susceptible host, and it just keeps going on and on to almost a never-ending cycle. Um, if the host is at risk for infection, i.e., not in the best health, have an underlying health condition, so on and so forth. Right? Breaking the chain. Hand washing procedure for sterile technique, proper waste disposal, appropriate laundry service, and housekeeping are ways of controlling the source. Isolation techniques, control of insects and rodents, use of disposable equipment and supplies help interrupt the modes of transmission. Right? And that's why we say make sure that you wash your hands for at least 20 seconds. Sanitize, disinfect the surfaces, etc., etc. People are doing this and still go home and live in filth, still sleeping on the same bed sheets for the last month and a half, still using the same towel to dry off on for 2 weeks. You know, putting food in the microwave that they haven't cleaned out in 6 months. All right, so I mean, just be mindful and just be mindful of what it is that you're doing. You can disinfect and scrub your hands until they're red and pink. But if you're still living a horrible lifestyle, kind of defeats the purpose. All right. Um, Even with your laundry service, if you have like one of the newer like front loading washing machines, like they are very susceptible to water being trapped in them, and they can like mold can start to build up in them. Right? So when your clothes are being washed, that mold is coming through in the water, is being embedded in the fibers of your clothing. It's going into the dryer, sitting in that heat, going into your drawers or your closet. Now it's contaminating your other clothes. You're putting this on, and you're going out in the world. See, all of these things, you have to take precaution with all of these things. All right, stay isolation techniques. control the insects and rodents. Make sure that you're constantly spraying around your house, right? Using disposable equipment, using disposable gloves and things of that nature. And as stated, if you believe that you're sick, just stay home. Just stay home. All right. Host susceptibles controlled by spreading patients' recovery by speeding patients' recovery. Um, Immunizations, transfusions, proper nutrition, medication, and adequate exercises um, help and regain help patients regain health. And this is things that I just spoke about. How the world panicked and brought out all the toilet paper, but no one brought fruits and vegetables or vitamins to build up their immune system. Right? Standard precaution designed to reduce risk of transmission of microorganisms from both recognized and unrecognizable sources of infections in hospital. These precautions include universal precautions designed to prevent transmission of all infectious agents. Right? Standard precautions provide protection from contact with blood and body fluids, all body fluid, all body fluids, mucous membranes, and non-intact skin. Right? Transmission-based precautions, airborne precaution, reduce the spread of airborne droplet transmission. Right? Droplet precaution, reduce disease transmission through contact of mucous membranes of eyes, mouth, or nose with large particle droplets that occur through sneezing, coughing, or talking. That's why they say, like, the rule of thumb is, like, if you have to cough or sneeze or something of that nature, you do it in your elbow. Okay, you don't want to just be sneezing out in the opening or coughing on someone, because that's how these things spread. So just doing simple stuff, just being mindful, getting out of your selfish ways, putting yourself into other people's shoes. A lot of stuff we could prevent a lot of stuff that goes on with us, around us, um, and we'll be in better moods, right? Um, Contact precaution reduce the risk of transmission of disease through direct or indirect contact. Right. Again, just if you feel like you're sick, stay away from people. Right. See tables 4-3 in the textbook. And here we talk about um, gloves and gowns, patient care items, things being airborne, driplets, and contact. All right. So you guys make sure that you look over that table. All right. So here's the airborne precaution. All right, you have your driplet precaution. You guys can look at these, um, back in your books. It'll be figures 4-7 through 4-9. All right, contact precautions. All right, standard precaution. Use your PPE to prevent um, precontinuous and premuscular exposure when in contact with blood or other body fluids of any patient that is anticipated to have something. Hands and other skin surfaces washed immediately and thoroughly if contaminated with blood or other body fluids. Hands washed immediately after gloves have been removed. Right here, figure 410, we see someone using hand sanitizer. Again, we know that hand sanitizer only kills 99.9% of the germs. Says it right there on the bottom. Again, you need that 1% of bacteria to help fight off infections. Another thing, while this another thing that's keeping the pandemic going is because, again, like, people aren't haven't been educated properly on how to do things. Again, going out buying all the hand sanitizer, over sanitizing your hands, like, you're breaking your immune system down by doing that. Now you're more susceptible to contracting the disease, or the COVID, or any disease or infection, because now your immune system is so weak, because you have been constantly cleaning it with this with these chemicals. The OSHA recommends that you wash your hands. So if you sanitize 2 times, the third time you should be washing your hands. Okay, washing your hands. Sanitize twice. Wash your hands the third go round. All right, that's going to keep you in good standard, and you won't have to worry about anything. And just over sanitizing, is you're just doing yourself more harm than you think. Right? And even with the disinfectant wipes, you should not be touching disinfectant wipes with your hands. All right. It says it right there on the thing. Again, a lot of people don't read that. Now you're coming in contact with all these harmful chemicals. Again, breaking down your body's defense system. Right? If in the event that you don't have gloves around to use at your disposal, and you use, say, like a Clorox wipe, um, you want to make sure that you wash your hands immediately after you finish using it. All right. Take precautions to prevent injuries caused by needles and other sharp instruments or devices during blood collection procedures, during disposal of used needles, when handling sharp instruments after procedures. Okay? Use safety engineered needles and sharp devices. Do not recap needles. Purposely bend or break them by hand, remove them from disposable syringe, or handle them for any reason. Okay? Immediately dispose of blood tube holder and safety needle as a single unit after blood collection. So we're not going to. You would never disconnect the needle from the hub. Once you connect that needle to that hub, they have now become one. It's a holy bondage. You cannot break that. Okay. So when you're finished drawing blood, the whole thing goes in the sharps container. The entire thing. All right. Uh, place disposable needles, lancets, and other sharp items after they are used in puncture-resistant containers for transparent for transport to biohazard waste centers. All right. There again, you see someone washing their hands. Process is continued. So when you see they whip their hands, dispensing the soap. They're scrubbing, make sure they clean in between their fingers, rinsing off, using a paper towel to turn off the faucet, because, again, you just want to make sure that you're protected, because you don't know who touched that before you, and you just washed your hands. So you definitely don't want to touch anything dirty after you just washed your hands. So you always use a paper towel to turn off the faucet and open the door to before you leave out. Again, you just clean your hands. You definitely don't want to get them dirty again. All right. Then after that, you'll put your gloves on. Take your gloves out one by one. Put them on. All right. And then eventually, when you go to take your gloves off, also you all learn this in CPR how to properly remove gloves. Right. There's two fingers under the wrist and pull them off, closing the one glove inside the other, disposing of them in the trash can. The biohazard should not be in the trash can. All right. Do not wear artificial fingernails or extenders. Keep natural fingernails less than 1/4 inch long. Wear gloves when there is possible contact with blood or other infectious materials. Remove gloves after collecting blood from patients. Right? Again, you are your own person. You have the right to be whoever it is that you want to be. Again, we spoke about this in previous chapters about the generational gaps and the people, the demographic of people that we'll be dealing with. It's cute for you to have your nails. You want them to glow in the dark. You want your stilettos, the coffin, the oval, almond, whatever. It is not acceptable in the healthcare field for numerous reasons. Okay? Numerous reasons. One of them being that your nails are susceptible to contracting diseases and infections because something will get up under there. Think about how long it takes you to get chocolate and barbecue sauce away from up under your fingernails. Okay? How long do you think it's going to take you to get blood that has gotten up under there and dried up? Think about that. I'm going to put a pin in here to continue.